David.
Hey, Tony.
How are you?
Okay, how you doing?
I'm doing okay.
Yeah. So where we were before is you talked about your way-seeking mind story. You know, your path to Zen and meditation and Zazen and all that. And
Right.
so, but you didn't stop doing that. You just stopped working for the Zen Center bakery, right? And then needed another job.
I did. Well, I worked at the bakery for many years, and after a while, I thought, geez, I've got a wife with a terrible disease, and I got a kid, and I got to make a living, and I'm in my 40s, and being around Zen Center was like being a senior in high school, but you don't leave the hallway, and you hang out with the kids at recess, and you're a year older. So, I worked for the private detective but that was just a short while. I don't because he didn't have that much work for me. And I worked.
Well, first you talked to Tink Thompson. Remind me how that conversation went.
Well, I've always liked figuring things out, and I thought that would be a great job for someone who's inquisitive,
Yeah.
And I talked to Tink Thompson, and I also talked to Sidney Lipset. You remember him?
I didn't know him, but I remember the name. He was a private eye in San Francisco, right?
He was in old school. He went back to like the 30s. He was an old man when I talked to him in this incredible old office, and he said, "No, this is not for you." He said, "I could send you up to a casino in Tahoe today to check out, who's cheating. I've got a case up there," he said, "but I can tell this is not for you. You should be doing something else."
Huh.
And he was astute, actually.
Mm-hmm.
But then I also talked to Tink Thompson, and he basically told me the same thing. I asked him, I said, "Do you have to take everything that comes across your desk?" And he says, "Yeah." He said, "You don't distinguish between this and that." And I said, "Well, what if it's like bad guys?" And he said, "Well, it's not for you to judge. You take the job as long as you're ethical."
And he told you if you didn't want to work for bad guys, you should become a social worker.
Right, and I thought, what a good idea, And that's so I signed up for grad school, but I signed up for clinical psychology as opposed to social work because there was a faster track.
Uh-huh.
But the job I ended up getting was basically social worker. Well, it was a combination of a case manager, therapist, social worker, outreacher. It was a job with many facets.
Mm-hmm.
Working for the Department of Public Health, on the streets, in the shelters, in the shithole hotels, out of the Tom Waddell Clinic down in Civic Center. And then that's what I did for 12 years until I came up here to Guerneville.
Well, how'd you get your first job?
Oh, I got. Well, I looked for about a year and a half. I thought, geez, given that with AIDS and homeless and all these terrible things happening, there should be jobs out there, grants and things like that. But finally, Rick Levine, who was head of the HIV clinic at Tom Waddell, said they're looking for a case manager therapist down there. Why don't you give it a try? So I was interviewed, and much to my surprise, I got the job. But it turns out that it was a really good fit. I mean, I just took to it like a duck to water.
I
I've worked with disturbed people in the past. I worked for the American Friends Service Committee in their first halfway house in San Francisco.
Yeah.
And when I was in the Air Force, I was a medic, but I was a psych tech. I worked on closed wards for 3.5 years.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So I had some experience with crazy people.
Uh-huh.
They don't scare me. I know they're the ones who are frightened. And and anyway, that's how I ended up working for homeless. With the homeless. What the hell was homeless? Anyway, the homeless programs.
Yeah. And so why don't you and you wrote about it, and
I did.
so why don't you read us from your, what do you call it, journal?
Yeah, I kept a journal for a short while. I can do that.
Yeah, it's good.
Shall we try what we did before?
Yeah, just read what you did before. It was all good.
Okay. I got to sort of squinch at my. I may pause here and then because I'm scrolling on my computer.
Yeah, that will not matter at all.
Right. Okay. So this part of my journal was about women. Oh, I also want to offer a caveat. I wrote I took an excerpt from my journal and it went into the Turning Wheel, the Buddhist Peace Fellowship
Oh yeah, right,
magazine.
Right.
That was around 1995, and I got called to task by one of the staff saying, I don't think you should identify people by race, because I say, 41-year-old white male, 34-year-old black female, but that's how I kept my charts and how I kept my notes. You have to identify the patients, and race is a big deal on the street.
Yeah. I give you my blessing to identify race.
Right.
People are very sensitive about stuff like that in America. Sort of
I know.
Over the top sensitive about stuff like that.
Right. Well, it's certainly a big deal on the street, and there's an amazing amount of tolerance on the street between black people and white people and Latino people because they're all in the same boat. They're all at the bottom, and so even race gets tossed out when you're surviving.
Yeah, when you're talking to a black person or a Hispanic or whatever, and they're telling you a story, they'll always tell you what the race was of the person they're talking about. There was a white guy used to come around here, so and so and so and so. Right,
exactly. And so the 12 years I worked, I would imagine probably 60-65% of the people I worked with were black, and a lot of them were women. A lot of them were women, and basically, frankly, to toot my own horn, you got to be pretty good to be a white guy to get the trust of a black woman. Of course, I had something to offer, once they got their heads straight. Anyway, I'll read to you, okay?
Oh, yeah, please. I'm all ears.
Okay, the day starts bright and early for me. I am out the door and onto the street. Ruby, Zen Center's favorite neighborhood hooker, is waiting for me. Not that Zen students take advantage of her services, at least I don't think so. It's just that she's very vocal, very labile, and she will talk to anyone within shouting distance. She will spot you in the distance and rapidly close the gap with her long-limbed strides. Many an innocent Zen student has had his or her day framed by these conversations. Everybody benefits. And when they and they're thinking, how the hell am I going to practice with this? And Ruby has had a painless interaction and is $2 the richer for it. Frequently, but always around 3 a.m., she will push all the doorbells to my apartment building while yelling out my name in a foghorn voice that can shatter windows. Since I live in the San Francisco that is rapidly disappearing, my neighbors are still hip. They are irritated but cool. Loudmouth Ruby, part of the neighborhood, doing her shit, Tony doing his. Ruby has a figure that would put a supermodel to shame, but her life is written on her African queen face. Big black intense eyes that scan and barely noticeable little jerks, an old scar that digs into the corner of her left eye, a missing upper front tooth, the gap somehow leaving her smile more attractive. Ruby dresses from garbage cans and dumpsters, and she does it with a sense of style that designers would kill for. Today, she's wearing 5-inch stiletto heels, black leotards, and a 2-inch strip of red and blue cloth flattens her tiny breast against her chest. A silk scarf, orange and yellow, is tied around her head in a turban and flows down her bare back almost to the ground. Ruby has lived 39 hell realm years. From the beginning, she has been swept and battered by wave upon wave of insane violence. Almost none of it has been of her own doing, and it has almost always been from the hands of men. Her grandfather started having sex with her when she was 7, and it has been downhill ever since. Her spiritual vision has been ratcheted down to the next blowjob given in the car, the next dollar, the next rock. Today, Ruby really needs $3 to send a, quote, Mother Mary statue to her mother, who is yet again dying of cancer. Do I have it? Why resist such a plea? A week later, I finally get Ruby to come to the clinic to hook up with the ever reluctant to lift a finger Stevie Pickett. This was a guy I worked with who didn't do anything. So he can take her to general assistance so we can get her $345 a month in food stamps. We walked from the Zen Center corner to the clinic. She is all dressed up, tiny red dress, high heels, heavy on the eye makeup. Honey, I want you to know, she says, I stayed sober for you this morning. I express my gratitude, which is genuine. I have nagged her for months about general assistance. I have a personal stake in this. I find it difficult to sit at my living room window after a hard day's work, look out and see Ruby digging through the garbage cans beside the corner store. I was never much for food anyway, she always says, in her easy, self-believing, lying way. We go up to the second floor. Women's clinic is in full swing, crowded, noisy, the sounds banging off the walls. Ruby suddenly turns truculent, mean. She looks around with quick little jerks of her head. Let's get this shit over with, she says, and shoves me away and runs down to the dark end of the hall. I am rapidly getting pissed off. Yet another attempt to get the bare minimum for someone. Once again, it's getting fucked up before it even starts. I walk up to her asking what's wrong. She is trembling from head to toe. I can't stand this. All these fucking people, the noise. I'm out of here. She rocks back and forth. From the waist and starts gulping for air, and tears are running through her makeup. I ask her to hold on to my arm. She grabs me, her fingers like a bird's foot, digs into my flesh. Just hold on to my arm, I say over and over. Just hold on. We stand there for about 15 minutes, and then I slowly walk her down the stairs and out of the clinic. I take the opportunity to get her a TB test, much to her annoyance, as we pass the nurse clinic downstairs. We go outside. a quick sloppy kiss on my cheek, and sorry, honey, maybe some other day, and she's off, walking quickly down the alley and towards the neighborhood. I realized I'd never seen Ruby indoors. The upside, I guess, is that I can add panic disorder with agoraphobia to her long list of diagnoses. Malvina Taylor comes to see me. She is a symptomatic HIV-positive 29-year-old homeless black woman, prostitute, crackhead, and victim of a lifetime of abuse. She looks about 14 with her slow brown eyes and her shy smile with her little teacup titties pushing through her shirt. Malvina does car dates from in front of my apartment building. I have thought that with proper management and supervision, she could have been a high-priced hooker doing little girl fantasies for rich old guys. Then I think, what is becoming of me that I can have such thoughts so casually? Malvina sat in my office, bouncing up and down off the chair, biting her lip, crossing and uncrossing her legs. She is usually shy and soft-spoken, but today she's loaded on crack and is in no mood to be little girl-like. It turned out that she was seriously shaken by the events the day before, and in the middle of the afternoon she got picked up by one of her longtime regulars, a white guy, a right-wing gun nut who managed to suspend his bigotry and racism once a week for a blowjob from a black girl. He parked his truck near the corner of 13th and Valencia, and as Malvina was finishing up the blowjob, he came, had a heart attack, and died. He had all this white foam coming out of his mouth, and his eyes rolled back, and he was rattling and twitching, and I put my hands on the sides of his neck and could feel his pulse, which is very fast, hammering away. I say, stay with me, but the pulse stopped cold, going 1 second, gone the next. I look, and he has dead eyes. I know he's dead. Died right there. Malvina relates her story with a mixture of wonder and consternation. Goddamn, why couldn't he die while his ugly honky wife was sucking his dick? I assumed this was a rhetorical question, so I said, well, you can't really plan this kind of thing. Malvina brightened right up. I guess there's worse ways to die, huh? I wholeheartedly agreed with her, and she said, besides, I always get my money up front. Lately, though, Malvina is not doing so well. Over the past few months, she has been hospitalized twice for heart attacks, twice for strokes, and once for meningitis. After not seeing her for quite a while, I saw her last Saturday afternoon on my corner. She looked even younger, like an African orphan, as the virus works its killing way with her. She was much thinner, and her big brown eyes were shining with fear as we spoke. The left side of her face had been affected by the strokes, and the corner of her mouth was constantly trembling. Her small motor movements were strobe-like, dizzying to watch, fluttering hands, feet tapping and checking out the sidewalk, head slowly swiveling this way and that. She managed to hit me up for $2, but ended our conversation midstream by jumping into a slowly passing van. Off she went with a little girl wave goodbye. She died a couple of weeks after that. Her obituary was actually in the paper, a first maybe for a homeless person, and it listed, to my surprise, about 40 local relatives. Where the hell have these people been? Maybe they tried to save her and just couldn't. It happens all the time. Could any of us have prevented this? I don't know. I think I could have worked harder, could have been more of a hard ass. I don't know. I don't know what the hell to think.
Mm.
I walked back from Market to the clinic around noon. At 7th and Market, 2 black and whites are pulled up half over the curb. 4 cops are standing around smoking cigarettes and talking shop. A thin black woman, her hands cuffed behind her back, is rolled up into a tiny ball on the sidewalk at their feet. I hear her voice, high-pitched. whimpering, a small clear thread of sound floating over the street. She is saying, "Please take me to the hospital. Please take me to the hospital. Please take me to the hospital." I see one woman after another for the rest of the day, chorus and verse of unrelenting trauma. Every one of them is black, young, homeless. Laney Cook was talking to another woman who suddenly punched her so hard in the face that she may lose sight in her left eye. I get a call from Psych Emergency at San Francisco General. Valerie Jones slashed her wrist last night after a fight with her girlfriend. She slipped her restraints in the ER and ran around the parking lot in a state of high drama before she was recaptured by the police. I confer with the doc on call. They will keep her for a few days. Start her on lithium and release her to the street. Then Tony Parker, a 32-year-old black woman who hangs on 6th Street, another wrist slasher. When I ask her about drugs and alcohol, she falls over in her chair and starts sobbing. "I don't want to stop," she cries. "I don't want to. Oh, Jesus, please, please help me." I put my hand on her shoulder. The deep, ragged furrows of old abscess scars pit and twist the flesh of her upper arm. I get on the phone and find her a bed for a week at the women's shelter. I am in despair. Who cares for these women? The feminist movement? The black so-called community? The people with clout? Self-serving administrators and devious policymakers? No. The ladies, each and every one, are being flung off the edge. I watch them go, flailing, screaming little rag dolls retreating into space. It's a brisk morning. The air is cold. The shadows sharp edge. Gusts of wind whip dirt around corners. I go down to the Tenderloin with photographer Johanna Nelson and co-worker Marion. It's the day before check day. $172.50 coming up tomorrow. Mother's Day for the poor. Money is scarce, but drugs, as always, are plentiful. Thus, the mood on the street is surly, angry, aggressive. Twice, once at 6 at Market, again at Eddy and Taylor, I am confronted by irritated black men who accuse me of being, quotes, a motherfucking cop. Both times are the result of me walking about with 2 women. Walking with one woman on the street doesn't seem to be a big deal, but being with 2 seems to draw or encourage some sort of male primal envy, an upsurge in the already toxic testosterone overload. Men copying attitude. They undress the women with their eyes, then stare unblinking at me, hoping their provocation will stir something up. I, however, have other things to do, and the women shrug it off as part of the job. They walk on while airily talking about the rat-like small brain qualities of men, me included. We end up at the women's shelter, now located in the St. Paul's Church on Goss Street. I spend the afternoon talking to black women who have been beaten, raped, stabbed, shot, thrown from cars and off rooftops, fucked by their daddies and brothers, by friends and strangers, women who are addicted, homeless, abandoned, and who are diseased and discarded in the most fundamental of ways. So on the way out, I see Kathy Day coming down the sidewalk. She is tall, thin, the color of Cafe LA, and walks in a loose stride like a basketball player. It is almost dark, and fog is rolling down the streets. Kathy stops to chat and shifts from one foot to the other. Her eyes, lion yellow irises, move around as she tries to listen to her inner voices and talk with me at the same time. I find myself once again delightfully listening to her marvelous voice, her finishing school diction with his firm-jawed tone. She inserts quick little trysts of dry wit and irony into her conversation. When I close my eyes, she sounds as if she could be blonde-haired and blue-eyed, wearing a tweed jacket, designer jeans, and riding boots. How can she sound like this, having known only East Oakland, the streets, and prison? I have asked her before, but she only shrugs and says, I don't know. However, there isn't much in the way of subject matter that brings middle-class blue-eyed blondes to mind. She tells me she has some sort of restraining order put against her. She quotes, cannot leave the state because I tried to kill a woman. She tells me she quotes, beat a murder rap by pretending to be crazy. I'm thinking, well, I rarely met a killer who wasn't crazy one way or another. Most of them are dumb, too. They can't problem solve. Of course, I talk to the ones who get caught as opposed to the others, the God-inspired, the politicians of every class, creed, race, sex, gender, who continue to murder from a comfortable distance every day. I think Kathy is very capable of popping a cap on someone if she were in the mood. She tells me she no longer visits her family in Oakland. Quotes, they always end up calling the cops. I've burned my bridges. Kathy smiles, blinks her fluorescent eyes at me, and flows into the shelter. I see that Louise has been standing quietly behind her. Louise is a chunky 20-year-old black woman who wears her hair straight and slicked back into a little ponytail. She holds her right hand out to me. The palm and fingers are so slashed and full of stitches that it looks like she's holding a piece of spiky fur. She raises her skirt and shows me 4 long cuts and numerous puncture wounds in her left thigh. Louise has been assaulted and almost raped by 2 Latino men at 4th and Townsend a few nights ago. Both men had knives and were drunk. She shrugs it off. Quote, drunk motherfuckers, could have been worse, and it ain't the first time. You walk around alone and shit happens. Evening at the Paris Aero Shelter, its newest name. The more modern Orwellian designation is Multi-Service Center North. Implied is the notion that services are available for those in need. Well, maybe sometimes for someone once in a while. They do have a couple of hard-working staff members bucking the odds and the idiot bureaucrats. The good ones never stay long. The entry and lobby are crammed with all sorts of folks. 3 or 4 languages are being used full blast. The noise, the volume, the vibe, a third world, post-apocalyptic jailhouse, nothing left to lose. People down on their luck looking for a night of sleep off the street. Drunks and junkies wander about hoping for a quick, cheap score. Old people, some of them well into their 80s, huddled up against the walls. Drag queens and trannies slide in and out of the crowd. Crackheads, wannabe pimps without women or boys, all colors and sizes of people, most with some combination of bandages, stitches, casts, contusions, swollen limbs, cuts, and sores. The air smells like a drunk tank. Evaporating alcohol, bleach, cheap perfume, rank tobacco, stale clothing, rotten breath, armpit sweat, and the ever-ubiquitous smell of old piss. I work out of our med clinic for a couple hours, plead fatigue, and skip out early. I turn the corner off Polk and start up Geary to the bus stop on Van Ness. 10 or 12 people are piled up in a tangle of blankets and rags in a narrow 4x8 alcove set in the side of the shelter. These are some of the folks who didn't make the daily lottery for a space on the floor inside. I see a couple of thin, grimy arms reach out, and a small voice says, help me, over and over. It is Sarah, a 50-something white woman from the South. I've known her for a couple of years, and she's never told me her last name. She always refuses medication because of her religion, and she has been on the run for many years, going from city to city in order to keep away from her ex-husband, who she once told me is the sole heir to the Campbell soup fortune. She shows me her feet and lower legs, which are burnt to a deep maroon because she fell asleep in the sun in the park. Her body is trembling, and the crotch of her jeans is wet with urine because she could not find a bathroom all day. Oh, shame, she says. People turn you away, and I just can't go behind a bush with people walking around. It is only my faith that keeps me alive. I go to the elder clinic. Mary May's out to look at Sarah. Mary gives her some ointment for her burns. I talk to Tommy and Jean, who are still in their blankets next to Sarah. Both of them are young, very thin, and pale. They are heroin junkies and have AIDS. Tommy is going blind. For now, they are very solicitous over Sarah, and they promise to watch after her and will try talking her into coming to the clinic. A young black woman is next to them, sitting up against the wall, sipping from a short dog of wine in a paper bag. She asked me if I might have some syringes for her diabetes. The rest of the crowd in the alcove are now awake and interested. Can you get me into the shelter? Are you a doctor? Do you have any food? Can I get them more blankets? Can I come see you tomorrow? Do you have meds for diarrhea? Can you help me? Can you help me? I don't know what to do. I am dangling at the end of my rope. I say, come see me in the morning. Let's see what happens. I walk on to the bus stop. In a doorway further on, a teenage white couple are sleeping the sleep of the young, tangled together like puppies, their arms and legs bare and sprawled out onto the sidewalk. Their blonde hair is tangled and messed up together. Their faces are peaceful, with eyes closed and mouths half open. I miss the bus. It groans by me, packed with weary people and spreading a rolling black cloud of diesel smoke over the entire street. I finally get home around 9:30. It is slow going. Got to keep it focused. I haven't read a newspaper since last fall. TV news, those fucking cannibals, is out of the question. When I hear anybody say anything at all about homeless or violence or drugs or what's wrong with the world today, blah, 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 I start to lose it. I don't like being around, quotes, normal people. They think the sky is falling selectively, that they aren't going to get hit. So that said, I have two short things here, David.
Yeah.
One is a poem that was written on the wall at 4th and Mission. It was, like graffiti.
Yeah.
They look away, but we're on the big trip. It doesn't matter if they told you you had but a year to live. What then? We will all be dead anyway in 80 years, all of us. So religion, I can't, goes. This is our time. This gray sidewalk of cigarette butts, this shopping cart night, this city, my feet are not dirty, my soul is alone. Not bad. 31 years old. Not bad for a life, considering it started out with baby milk and fried chicken. Isn't that a great poem?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And here is the last thing. I was walking down Polk Street near Civic Center, and there was a young black woman in front of me, and she was singing. And this is what she was singing. I don't care how hard you hit me, I won't cry. You can knock holes in my floor, I won't cry. I don't care how hard you hit me, I won't cry. I won't say a word. I will die before I open my mouth. And that's it for me today, David.
Wow. Yeah. Well, heavy stuff, Tony. And
it's still going on. There's not been much change on the streets in the city. Maybe it's even worse.
Oh yeah. Listen, that area of San Francisco, it's worse than places in India where India's full of beggars and homeless. I came out of a train station one morning in Jaipur, and I bet there were 500 people sleeping on the pavement in front of it in a big area. I've been with lepers and just people with no fingers and were beggars. They all had culture and family, and the homeless that I have seen in San Francisco are the most hopeless people I've seen in the world.
I believe it.
Yeah.
I believe it.
Yeah. Now I'm sure there's.
David, I worked with in various. There were maybe half a dozen people I worked with, not just in my organization, but with others around the city, who had worked in refugee camps in Asia and Africa.
Yeah.
And they burn out, and they come home to San Francisco, and they look around and they go, Jesus Christ, it's worse here than where I just left. I've got to go back to work.
Yeah.
And they would go to work, in the city.
Yeah. On Al Jazeera it's an incredible network. It's world news and world tragedy, a lot of it. But the people who are having tragic times, they interview them. They lost their homes. They had to go away from where they were because of violence. They need food. But they all still have some connections to others, and they're not just crazy, and it's different. It's different.
Yeah.
But we lead a pretty cushy life here in Bali, so I don't here. I'm not in contact with that sort of thing. There are very, very poor people here, but they're in villages, and they have connections, and some of them are just unbelievably bad. There's, they're in mud a lot of the rainy season and stuff like that, and they don't have dental care, and there's all these programs trying to reach to them, and but they I don't know, man. Stuff I've seen in America, and I used to go talk to homeless people when I was a kid, and they were interesting. They were by choice. They were hobos, and they were characters.
Right, and then all of a sudden there was more than hobos around.
Around when?
Around, I would say, the mid-'80s. What happened? One of the things that happened in California was Ronald Reagan closed down all the mental hospitals and said, well, the communities can take care of this, but of course the money never came.
Yeah.
And while Ronnie was closing down the hospitals, the legal system made it so that anybody could refuse to take a medication.
Yeah.
So and I would say most mentally ill people I ran across did not want to take medication. That's one reason they were on the street.
Yeah.
So between those two things, not being legally bound to take meds, and there being no state hospitals, floods and floods of mentally ill people were turned out onto the street. This was somewhere in the mid-'80s, I would guess.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or maybe earlier.
Yeah. They didn't close the hospitals. They just let out everybody that could barely take care of themselves, and just kept. Because I used to do stuff in the mental hospitals, and everybody in the mental hospitals was completely unable to do anything. Anybody that could walk and get out and do something, they let them all go. And one reason is because Thomas Saz, he wrote a book about how holding people against their will when they're not dangerous is wrong, and it became the gospel in America. Then they not only stopped holding people against their will, they just let everybody go. I know a guy wrote a song called something. God, I probably could get him to send it. Total Madness or something about one day in New York when 10,000 people were let out in one day.
Oh my!
That's what he said. That's one thing that Thomas Saz created a revolution in you couldn't hold people against their will if they weren't dangerous, over 72 hours. And the other thing was the advent of these behavioral drugs, or what do you call them, that people could get more able to, deal if they were on this medication.
On the street, taking drugs is just one thing. I mean, can you imagine your first night on the street? I mean, there you are. And this happens to thousands upon thousands upon thousands of people.
Yeah.
I mean, whether their drugs are working or not, they're on the street. They're subject, and especially women, I mean, are subjected to violence and degradation.
Yeah. God, it's terrible. It's terrible. Society, like in America, it just doesn't seem to be able to deal with it. There's so many people that want to do something about it, that do what they can. But the overall structure of society it's sort of laissez-faire capitalism.
Yep.
That's a tendency, I think, in history, in civilized societies, for for it to go through periods of more egalitarian distribution of wealth, but then the certain people start amassing more and more and more, and then the discrepancy between the rich and poor gets greater and greater, and the people who have more wealth, of course, they feel entitled. They feel they work hard, and the other people are lazy bums who just, are inferior. And but then sometimes there's people from the elite class, which actually, to me, you and I are both from the sort of elite class. We have education, information. Even if we don't have any money, we're ahead of the game. We're white.
Right.
And people from that come out and want more egalitarianism, and sometimes that works. Certainly, there was a tendency in Europe to move, toward slowly toward democracy and sharing governance, taking it, away from the one king, to spreading it out. But it's such a problem, people figuring out, human race figuring out how to deal with problems.
Well, it's a real problem now for here.
Yeah. So what's the, do you have any idea, I mean, is there anybody you follow or have read or anything that, any solution to it?
No, no, I haven't read anything about homeless for many years. I don't know if anything has even been written about it. I assume so.
Oh, yeah.
But what I read, is in the papers as the politicians and the bureaucrats desperately try to figure out what to do. I mean, what is needed is housing, which even middle-class people can't get anymore. And that's not just California. Prices for homes are going up everywhere.
Yeah.
And homeless people need the single best thing I could do for someone was get them inside. That was the game changer. That was the game changer. Not that and getting them in touch with a doc. Those were my two goals all the time. Get them inside, and I don't know what to do. Build whole little villages of tiny little self-sufficient houses and have support services there. Have a laundry area. Have a garden. Have a social worker on call. Have security guards. I mean, the money is there. It just seems that there's millions or hundreds of millions to spend on homeless and nothing changes. And to me, that's what would change it. Housing. I've just seen radical transformations once a person, even in you get someone a little bitty room in a halfway decent single room only hotel, and they're just transformed. They start showing up for appointments. They start finding ways to get food. They have a shower, a place where they can take a bath, where they can trim their fingernails. It's just amazing what a place to live will do for someone.
Well, that's really good to hear. I mean, that's important information. I wouldn't have known to say that.
Yeah. I mean, some people can't make it inside. A lot can't make it inside, but many thousands more could if it were available.
Well, I look at it, I guess, from sort of a simplistic point of view, that the distribution of wealth and just the idea of society of not being responsible for each other.
Right.
But I haven't dealt. The little stuff I've done was, around. More around, a little bit around voter registration, then in environment and anti-nuclear, and in terms of what I post over the last 20 years, which is about my only involvement, is climate change, war on drugs, and torture. I've stayed away from political stuff. Yeah, and now it's mainly climate change, because I think, that's
the biggie, David.
Yeah, the species. More than our species is threatened, so I'm in favor of anything that where the higher forms of life survive. I'm not concerned about the Taliban God, they had a very small footprint. We're sort of mass murdering ourselves. But
yep.
Anyway, I'm around a lot of Hindus, and it's just the Kali Yuga, or there's Brahman, Vishnu, and Shiva. Brahma's the creator, or and Vishnu's the preserver, and Shiva's the transformer. Shiva's the destroyer, but they like to say the transformer. And I just think we're in a heavy Shiva period right now. But, if you have a sense of a bigger picture, you always want to try to reduce people's suffering and be kind and that sort of thing. But even if our ship is going down, things continue in a bigger picture. And what is it? Muhammad said nobody after they died ever really wanted to come back.
Yeah.
Yeah, people here, they've got such a sense of, in India, they've got a sort of sense of a bigger picture, something cosmic or something. So it's not just like the end of everything when things end. It's part of the, it's part of the dance of life and death.
Yeah.
But that sort of stuff can't be any excuse for neglecting trying to deal with problems and reduce suffering.
Right.
That's
right. I agree.
Well, thanks for all you did, and
thank you, Dave, for all you do.
You came to California. You got involved with Zen. You and Darleen were practicing Zen, and she moved more into like being a Zen teacher, and you into being a social worker. And then the next thing you know, you've started this Zendo in Guerneville, and it's been going. You're not meeting now because of the virus, but
right.
Yeah, it's an interesting story.
Yeah. Well, thank you for having me on your podcast. I'm in great company.
Yeah, I'm in great company. It's more than an interesting story. It's a noble story, I think.
Yeah.
They say the happy birthday song here in Indonesia translates long life to you, long life to you, long life to you and a noble one. Yeah.
Wow, how nice.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Take care. Hey.
Yeah, thank you, David.
Listen, you've got more stuff. I've got it. I don't know if you've got it. If somebody writes Tony Patchell on Cuke.com in the site search box on the home page, they'll find more stuff that you've written, and I want you to read it too.
Okay.
If you don't, I have it. So if you don't have it, I have it.
Okay, I do have it.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Take care.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.